Hey skiers, I'm Jeff from skiessentials.com.
I'm Bob. How's it going?
Bob and I are here today to talk about his experience in these Kastle boots next to us. And like I said last time we were sitting here, I'm really excited to hear more about your experience.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest about these boots for sure. You know, they pop up
They're
on
easy to spot.
They're easy to spot. That was kind of, I stuck that in the conclusion of the written piece, where it's a very sharp looking boot and very eye catching because the performance of it certainly supersedes the look, but it's like we talked about previously with your Mirror's core with the orange bindings and my head cores with the nice pivot matching bindings.
Sometimes it's nice to just like the way that your equipment looks.
It's okay to be a little bit vain.
Yeah, sure.
So I definitely enjoy the way these look, but more so the way that they've skied.
Yep. So Bob spent a lot of time in these boots this past season. As we mentioned in that Salomon Supra boot review, you also skied a bunch of different boots this year. And you have an existing boot fitting background, spend a lot of time analyzing boots and writing product descriptions and stuff like that. So definitely know your way around a pair of boots. And what do we got here, Bob? Kastle K130P.
Yeah, and this is kind of the first full year of their entire line of boots. So they have, I believe it's down to a 100 flex in this K line. And they're all in the mid-volume range. They also have two plug boot like race models, like a K150R and I think it's a K130R, which are 91 millimeter plug boot lasts. These are mid-volume 100 millimeter in the 26.5. This is a 27.5, which does measure 101 in the forefoot, so it is on that roomier last side.
Still looks pretty sleek. It doesn't look like a roomy, big, bulbous boot.
No, not remotely, and it kind of fits that way too. They can get away with it by...
It fits pretty sleek.
Yeah, and when we get into the liner, that'll become more apparent why they can get away with these things. But, you know, my initial impression, kind of the thesis statement, is that this is a recreational plug boot.
Yeah, I like that.
It really just performs. I've always wanted to have a plug boot, but there's no chance my foot is ever going to fit into one. So, a happy accident here with Kastle that they basically made a mid-volume plug boot.
And if you're curious, performance benefits of a plug boot, in theory, better power transfer, more efficiency.
Yeah, in that 91, you're basically carving the inside of the shell around the foot so that the closer your foot is to the plastic, the more direct the transfer of energy is from leg to foot to boot to ski.
Yep.
So having something that is a little bit more generous for us higher volume people is really nice.
Yeah, nice to have.
Yep.
So holding this thing in my hands, it feels like the real deal. Not that I can think of a boot that doesn't feel like a real boot, but I think you probably know what I'm saying. This is a serious ski boot here.
Yeah, that was my first impression too, and I'll just kind of walk you through the shell of this thing. Compared to that Salomon Supra, I also spent a lot of time in a Lang RS 130 this year. The big difference with the shell is just the thickness of the plastic.
Yeah, that's probably what is giving off that vibe that I'm getting of this thing's serious.
Everything from the buckles, and maybe we can get a shot of that later, just the thickness of the plastic on the upper cuff, and then combined with just the amount of overlap in the shell.
Yeah.
That was a real big difference that I noticed when putting it on, taking it off. Not too difficult, but also not super user friendly. It's not like there's a multi-injection of plastic over the instep like a lot of other high-end.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably just see from there how high that lower shell piece comes up.
Great visual. Is the higher that comes up, the more consolidated and the more...
And there aren't exactly big slits on the sides there either.
No, it's a very, very robust lower shell that's coming up into that cuff.
Yeah.
And then that plastic in your right hand there, Jeff...
is thick.
That's thick.
And it's got some responsiveness
it comes right
to it.
back.
Some closure. It reminds me of Nordica Pro machines.
Yep.
You know, I think I did a visual of the difference between Speed Machine plastic and Pro Machine, and this definitely has more Pro Machine-esque closure.
Yep. Yeah, so real deal plastic here. They're a little bit tight-lipped in their literature as to what exactly it is.
Yeah, it's always interesting.
You know, probably some mix of polyurethane and polyethylene in here, but other than that, you know, it's a proprietary plastic from Kastle. They are made in Italy, at a factory in Italy, and I think that they're going to shift production to more Kastle-based factory, or at least that's what I've heard.
Interesting.
So it's not a Kastle factory right now, but it looks to be in the future, especially as they make more of these things. But that's kind of that big difference with the shell. They do have like these fancy lower buckles. I don't know if you've played around with that at all, but it's just a quick release tab. I did not use them. You know, it sits a little flatter. It's fine. It's not as earth-shattering as BOA closure system on these lower buckles, but there is just a little easy release tab there.
It's kind of cool.
It's cool, but when you have your mittens on, it's not like it's any easier than just unbuckling.
Certainly not. Probably harder.
Yeah. And like the way that I've got the fit dialed, you know, those buckles they're loose. They're hanging on.
Sure.
They're just keeping the boot
Well, it
closed.
feels like the type of boot that, yeah, if you dial the fit in right, these shouldn't have to do very much.
No.
Like this forefoot of the boot just feels very robust.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like I'm like manipulating that plastic much at all by really ratcheting down that buckle.
They came pre-installed with Alpine soles, which is great for boot skiing. They did also come with grip lock soles, but I left the Alpine soles on mostly because Jeff and I switch skis a lot, so it's easier to stick with the same norm. But
yeah, I'm a holdout.
Yeah, but a really solid lower lug here for sure. They do get the upper cuff adjustment here on the sides and 2 rivets in the back. You could remove one or both if you wanted to soften it, but they also make the softer versions of this boot. So I never saw any reason to make this thing softer. I loved how stiff it was.
They all look like maybe a T10.
Yeah, and same with the buckles too.
Yeah.
Very like
one tool should do everything.
Yeah, very user-friendly from an adjustability standpoint. And then that nice kind of ratchet-style power strap up top, just easy to use. Nothing crazy there, definitely that higher quality. I ended up like finding that this thing would sit inside the cuff more than some other boots.
Yeah, well, it kind of looks like that too. Like there's not really much plastic up here for it to interact with.
No, and I found that to be interesting, you know, and it didn't really affect the performance one way or another from my experience.
Sure.
But normally I don't have the power strap fall inside the cuff.
Nor do I, but it is, I think, interesting to point out on these.
Yeah. So that's the shell and kind of all of those features. I think the liner is really where this thing gets interesting. And that's kind of looks more into that plug boot heritage. So this thing comes with this lace-up, pretty low-profile liner. It does have some memory foam in here. I did not heat it. It's, you know, didn't really need it. It did come with these kind of aftermarket C-bands, J-bands, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
I put it on and didn't really notice that much of a difference, but it certainly wasn't worse.
Yeah, and like easy to take on and off.
Yeah, they Velcro on. It's like
system.
a nice, it's just a cool little thing. Like they Velcro right on, so you can do it at home if you want.
Yeah, I feel like more boot manufacturers should include that in the boot.
No, I thought that was a nice touch.
I mean, like, I can't even tell you how many little L-block, J-block things I've cut out of foam, and I fit boots less than you did.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was kind of impressed to see that come right in the package. And then that lace-up liner, and like these, they also have the eyelets in them, so you can lace this thing right into the liner.
Yeah, no, I think it's very cool.
Which I thought was interesting. And then they do have the Velcro in the front for the tongue adjustment, so you can move that tongue up and down as you see fit. Normally just kind of helps dial in the instep fit. I did not touch it from stock. I just kind of rolled with it and had no issues. But really, this liner makes a huge difference in the boot. When we talk about other kind of higher end recreational 130 flex boots, a lot of those liners are very, very stuffed with material, whether it's cork, like high density foam, other things, special foam
Stuff.
material. And it kind of takes a while for the boot to break in, and it also packs out. With this, you're not only getting your foot closer to the shell for that more direct transfer of energy, but the way that it fits on day one is pretty much how it fit on day 50 for me.
Yeah.
And then moving into next year, it's not like it's going to change anymore.
No, I don't see this packing out much.
So I think the consistency of this lower profile liner and then merging with the thickness of the shell and the burliness of the shell really makes for a predictable fit from day one to day infinity. And, kind of touching on performance, but not going full into it, that has an effect in terms of warmer temperatures. So less liner, more shell, more consistent performance through a broader temperature range.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I thought that was really interesting, and just a departure from other boots that we see kind of at this level.
Yep.
And that's where that whole theory of that recreational plug boot, that mid-volume plug boot analogy comes from, where it's not a recreational boot built to kind of look like a race boot.
Right.
Like
it's got more
really
actual race boot in it.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty good way to do it. I did put the spoiler in the back, a little bit more forward lean, more aggressive stance, and to accommodate for kind of a flatter ramp angle. It's like a 2-degree ramp as opposed to like a 4, like we see a lot of 4s.
You threw a little heel lift in there?
Yeah, I put a little heel lift on there just to help unlock my ankles a little bit.
An extra shim in there too?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up thinking like, well, this actually has some room in it. And so, yeah, put some fit aids in there. And
I love the minimalist style inside this shell. Like there's not like a bunch of ridges or weird things that this has to sit in. It's just like you can kind of see from the bottom of that. It's just pretty basic and smooth.
Right, and the more direct that thing sits on the base of the boot, the more direct that energy is going to go.
And like I've broken boot boards
Yep.
partly because they have too many little moving pieces, or different little pieces, and so I think that's cool.
Yeah.
So sounds like fit's pretty consistent for you, pretty snug, but not painful.
No pain whatsoever. It is just a little snug in the forefoot, but because the liner doesn't have material really over the tongue, over the instep, like I didn't have any issues.
Yeah,
like,
feet can still kind of breathe or get circulation.
Yep. From looking at it, I thought I was going to have problems, but really zero through the year, which is remarkable for me.
So how about the skiing part, Bob? Why don't we start with carving turns on firm snow, driving a ski. It's 130 flex boot, so I think that's an important place to start.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind that like 130 is specific to just a line within a model.
Yes.
So like this is a different 130 than others.
Yep.
It's a very stiff and very responsive boot. So every little bit of movement you put into it gets translated to the snow. And with this thing, you really couldn't push past it. Like I was really, really impressed with how strong this thing is. Like I'm a big guy. I had a lot of leverage with lower leg length.
Yep.
And I enjoy being able to flex my ankles, but I also really like the solid feel of this thing.
Yep.
So yeah, groomers, this was definitely my better race boot for this year for our ski bum races.
Right, probably the closest thing you have. I mean, I guess your RS-130 is kind of in that same world, but yeah, this seems like the closest thing you own to a race boot.
Yeah, this thing's super responsive, amazing grip. Like, I just remember getting my first kind of real boot and then back in high school, like the right fit, the right flex.
Yep.
And thinking, wow, my edges actually work.
Right.
Like I didn't equate that
Right.
my foot was moving and therefore my edges weren't engaging.
Right.
And then you get into a proper fitting, stiffer boot and you're like, oh, then my ski works
Right.
the way it's supposed to work.
So
and
this made your skis work.
Yeah, totally. And like very, very stable. You can, with the weight, some might see that as a hindrance. It's like a lighter boot is more maneuverable, more agile, but this thing is just solid.
Yeah, and when you're railing turns on groomers, it doesn't really matter how much your boots weigh.
Right.
If anything, like sometimes heavier can feel a little bit better.
Yeah. And you'd think that would have a negative effect when it got soft or moguls or trees or tighter spots.
Yep.
But it didn't.
Yes, you enjoyed them in off-piste
Totally.
or ungroomed scenarios too.
Yep.
So that's really interesting because for some reason I incorrectly had the impression that you didn't. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, even if just for my own sake.
No, this was my favorite mogul boot this year. I never felt like it was too aggressive.
Yep.
Like sometimes I feel like the rear support was much needed. Like if you get in something that's a little bit soft and you don't have the rearward support, and like you're not supposed to be leaning back in your boots, but you really notice it when you don't have it.
Right.
So like boots with walk modes or softer flexing boots.
Yep.
When you get a little bit back, you all of a sudden realize, oh, I don't have any more rearward support.
Yep.
But something like this really keeps you engaged, and just the responsiveness made it really, really kind of amenable to those mogul turns, quicker turns, trees, and stuff like that.
And not like you're not finding much. Like there's not an unforgiving side to this boot.
Not that I could find, which I was kind of surprised about. I definitely thought that it was gonna be a bit too much.
Yeah.
And the reality was not the case.
Sweet.
So yeah, really impressed with how it handled that stuff. And then, like through crud and chop and moving fast through broken snow, really did a great job of taking that clatter down and just making it seem like a really smooth run, which was really, really nice.
So safe to say that Kastle boots are here to stay?
That's not my call, but I will keep them on my feet so long as I have them. Just that blend of having this minimal liner really works well for me, and I didn't think that was going to be the case. So the reality of this far superseded my expectations.
Am I correct in saying that you liked this liner so much that you put this liner in some different boots this season?
I did.
We don't have to say what those boots were.
No,
but I think that's testament to how much you liked the liner.
I also put other liners in this shell, to be fair.
Fair enough.
So I do like to mix and match and see kind of what liner works well in which shell. Obviously, if you take a more stuffed liner and put it in this shell, it's going to change things up.
Yep.
And if you take this minimalistic liner and put it in a tighter shell, like even a smaller boot,
then it hurts. Yep.
So it was very interesting to see kind of the differences between going back and forth, and ultimately I settled on Kastle liner, Kastle boot.
So I feel like that covers everything. The last thing I wanted to mention, this just kind of came up in my mind as I was sitting here. Boot reviews are a little funny.
Boot reviews are very funny. Yeah.
Mostly because boots are just so incredibly subjective.
As subjective as we think skis are, and the minutia of skis and how they affect people, boots are that to the nth degree.
Times 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is working for me in this Kastle boot might not work for you, might not work for 50% of the people out there.
Right.
Or more, or less.
Yeah.
But
so
totally.
A good thing to remember. If you watch this and you're thinking like, that boot sounds great, like it still is important to go through the proper procedure of finding a ski boot, and that procedure almost always starts with visiting a boot fitter.
We did get a lot of comments on the S Pro BOA video about, do you think this would fit my foot?
Like, I have no
And
idea.
I have no idea. So it's impossible.
Right.
It's a winless conversation to have.
Yep.
Especially on the internet. You do have to put your actual foot in the actual boot and hopefully get some customization even from there.
Right.
So out of the box, there are very few victories to be had.
Right.
You do have to put the work in. You got to put your feet in the boot. You got to get a custom footbed.
Yep.
You got to have your stance looked at.
Yep.
So there's a laundry list of things before you get to this point.
Right.
So definitely a good point to bring up. It's just impossible to say, will my foot work in this?
Yeah, and I think it's totally fine to sit here and have a conversation about these boots and be able to say when you look at it with an objective perspective, then this is a really good product.
Yeah.
They have created a valuable product here, but will it work for you? That's a whole different journey, and one that I think is really important for the skier and the consumer to go through kind of on their own.
Yeah.
You got to learn your feet and what works, and
there's too many variables.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that in there in case a ton of people were going to go buy Kastle 130Ps and then get mad at you that they didn't feel great, or that they couldn't automatically ski moguls super well.
Yeah, I'll take that blame. That'll be fine.
Okay. Everyone go buy the K130Ps
and then email me how mad you are.
Yeah, I'll send you Bob's phone number. You can give him a call.
Awesome.
So thanks, Bob. That was fun.
Yeah, no, it was great, and I was very happy to be able to ski on these this year.
Yeah, maybe we'll switch things up. Maybe I'll take a turn on the boot side next. Although you far surpassed me on your boot testing this year.
Yeah, I have a few more models to go.
Yep. So let us know if you have any Kastle K130P questions. Almost certainly we'll pass those questions along to Bob, or he will receive them directly. But let us know if you have any questions, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.